You have a message, a story, or an experience that's going to change the world. But I want to ask you a few questions. What would it be like to write a book that impacts the lives of 27,000 people? What would it be like to get royalties in the five-figure range for your book? What would it be like to look at the statistics and find out that over 1 million pages of your book were read? Well, all three of those things happened to me, and it's partly because of my guest today, Jim House. Today, we're going to be talking about the top 9 publishing tips to share your message. This is the Bunker Bash. Get ready to have some fun. Hey there, it's Ed Rush. Welcome to the Bunker Bash. We air live every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern. This is the most positive place on the planet with insanely implementable ideas. And I just have to tell you that when I go out looking for guest experts, I don't go looking for people who are out there speaking and teaching on a topic. I look for people who are actually out there doing the topic. And my guest today, Jim House, is the person who helped me write my latest book, 21 Day Miracle, which at one point was Amazon's #1 business book. It was the number 22 book overall. One day I woke up, I was in Dallas actually traveling. One day I looked at my account at 10 o'clock in the morning. I had sold over 1,000 books in a single day. And Jim and I are going to be talking about not only how to create a great book, but how to promote a great book. But before I do that, welcome to you. I'm glad that you came to join us here. If you're watching us live today, we're Friday. So today's Focus Friday. I get to hear your big implementation items right in chat. If you're watching us recorded, welcome to come join the show. Make sure that you come join us sometime when we're live. I want to say hello to some of our amazing friends in chat. Hello, Delisa Tool. Welcome. Good to see you again. Delisa's running the show behind the scenes for us. Barry, what's going on, man? Good to see you. Dennis Bauer, welcome back. The Barber says, hey, Delisa. Jim Butts, welcome. Good to see you as usual. Terry and Sherry from Yorktown, Virginia. Wendell Buggs, welcome back. John Teague. John, it's drinking time in England by now. I don't know what you've got cracked open, but it's coffee for me this morning. Good morning, Robin Roberts. Good to see you. Gissy from Germany. Y'all make fun of me because I don't drink my coffee. Hold on. Sandeep. Hi, oh wise ones, he says. So today we're going to roll up our sleeves and talk about how to publish your book. We are in the middle of Expert Week. And if you have been with us all week, it's been an awesome week. We started out on Monday with the top 9 live streaming tips to grow your business. On Tuesday, I brought in my friend, Marquetta Breslin. We talked about how to build your social media platform. On Wednesday, Paul Culligan came in, top 9 podcasting tips to broadcast your message. Yesterday was Knowledge Bomb after Knowledge Bomb with Yakov coming in to talk about LinkedIn. In fact, he taught so much on the show yesterday that we actually overflew the training. We're going to do another training next week, a little private training for LinkedIn. And then today, top 9 book publishing tips to share your message. By the way, I have some shows planned for you next week that you're not going to believe. On Monday, we're going to get back into teaching some of the advisor consultant stuff and show you how to stop trading hours for dollars and start getting paid what you're worth. That's going to be the show where I'm teaching you the entire time. And then on Tuesday, I've got my friend Michael McIntyre coming in. Michael built a $3 billion, that's billion with a B, sales, a business with $3 billion worth of sales. He's going to come in and share his business growth strategies. He sold his company, and Michael is doing quite well. Okay, so we're gonna have a good time next week. So make sure that you are subscribed to the Bunker Bash. You can do that at edrush.com/Bunker Bash. Click the button below. And by the way, if you're on Facebook or on YouTube, please click that like button. That tells everybody that they should come and watch this content because the truth is they should. If you're watching us on recording, we're in the middle of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. I think we're going to get back to work here pretty soon. I've got a good, positive outlook about that. And like I've been saying all week, look, it's either going to get worse and then we're going to be in charge, or it's going to get better and then we're going to be in charge. But one way or another, entrepreneurs like you and me, I believe, are going to take over the world. And one of the ways you're going to take over the world is by sharing your message. And I can't think of a better way to share your message than in book format. So I want to take you back just a few years. And I'm going to introduce my guest here in about 30 seconds. But I want to take you back about 2 years, 2 summers ago, actually. I think it was 2.5 summers ago. I decided I was going to write a book, and I was going to give myself the challenge of using the same strategies that I was teaching in the book to write the book. And so I sat down on a Monday morning with a title in mind. I didn't have an outline. I had an idea. It was called the 21-Day Miracle, how to change anything in 3 short weeks. That was essentially what I had, an idea. I sat down and I started writing the beginning of the book. That afternoon, I realized I needed help. So I reached out and called my friend Jim House. And I said, Jim, here's the deal. I'm writing a book, and I'm going to go from idea to #1 best-selling author in 21 days, because the theme of the book is what you can do in 21 days. And I said, hey, Jim, listen, I need some help. So I was wondering if you would come in. And he said, sure, I'd be happy to help you. Where are you in the process of planning? I said, no, you don't understand. Today is day 1. So Jim masterfully brought in a team of editors and graphics people and web people. And within not 21 days, within 19 days, we had a book published on Kindle and on paperback. We had a beautiful website created. I'll show you that website in just a little bit. And on day 20, not day 21, on day 20, it reached #1, the #1 best-selling book in its category. And just another month after that, it was the #1, Amazon's #1 business book. I can tell you that I wouldn't have been able to do it without Jim House. A little background on Jim. Jim was a high school principal who wrote a book called Resetology that helped parents better connect with their kids. He has a great way of teaching parents how to diffuse difficult situations. Jim came and we spent some time together, and we ended up launching for Jim this book publishing business. And since then, he's worked with celebrities and authors around the world, charging insanely high prices, by the way, to help them publish their message and change the world. So my man, Jim House, first of all, I just want to say thank you again. I've said this to you before, but this book would not have been possible without you. Thanks for joining me on the show, man. It's good to have you.
It's so good to be here, Ed. I always love hanging out with you, and we always talk about amazing things, and I always learn a lot.
Yeah, we're going to have fun today. By the way, we're going to be taking your questions later on. If you've been with us on Expert Week, we've been doing rapid fire questions at the end of today's show. Today, Jim's got 9 publishing tips to share your message. But I will tell you parenthetically, what Jim is going to teach today changed the way that I do everything when it comes to publishing. And I did promise Jim, I'm working on my 6th book now. I did promise Jim, hey man, I'm not going to do like 21 days next time. Like, we can really work and plan this thing out. And we've spent a full day together actually outlining the content of book number 6. So Jim really is one of those people behind the scenes. And I'll tell you, there were pieces and parts of this book that needed to go away. There were pieces and parts of the book that needed to move. There were conversations that were left unfinished. And if it wasn't for Jim, I certainly wouldn't have sold 27,000 copies of the book. I'll show you the stats. I mentioned them in the intro, and then we'll get to the tips. In 2 years, 2 years after publishing the book, we sold 27,300 books. That's paperback and Kindle. Over $14,000 in royalties. Actually, there's more than that. I didn't calculate all the international royalties because, like, there's some currencies that I just didn't feel like but it has sold all around the world. I think it sold about 5,000 copies in India alone. And this is cool. Kindle gives you pages read. This is just Kindle, by the way. This doesn't include paperback pages read. 1,452,153 pages read, which warms my heart.
So good.
There's also over 200 positive reviews on the book, stories about people whose lives changed. Some of you are watching this show right now primarily because you first read the book. And so I'm here to tell you this whole intro was about you. This whole intro is to tell you that now's the time to publish your message. There is right now, I think, an incredible door open on Amazon specifically, which sells about 70% of all books, for you to be able to quickly publish your ideas, get them out into the world, and really influence people for good. So, Jim House, you ready to jump in and start sharing some of your content bomb strategies on publishing, my man?
I am so ready. And we've really done a careful job of curating 9 that people can take and use today. So these are going to be powerful.
That's right. The things that you can take action on. All right. So if you just joined us, my name is Ed Rush. This is the top 9 book publishing tips to share your message. I'm here with my book publisher, Jim House. Jim, take us to tip number 1.
So tip number 1 is you need to get into state before you write, before you plan, before you do anything in the creation or writing process of your book. This is so important. I can't underestimate. If this is the only thing you walk away with today, your book is already going to be a better book. Because I used to think that the body was just some athletic shuttle that carried the brain around. I didn't realize that it was all a connected system. And when I started to get people into, not only myself, but help my authors get into a peak performance state, a state where they could access the best content of themselves, both cognitively, but spiritually, psychologically, all of those elements together. When you're in state, you access different content. And so you can, whether you're in the planning portion of the book or whether you're in the writing, even if you start a writing session and you do some and do some exercises, we have a lot of different kinds of things to do. It can be some yoga, it can be some calisthenics, it can be partly meditation. I always lead people in prayer before we start as well. Whatever you do, if you take a break and come back to your laptop or to your journal, do it again. Keep priming the pump. So and one of the pieces that's important about that, I joke that you have to, if you want to write right, you have to pee white. So that just is, your brain functions way, way better when you are hydrated.
Say that again. If you want to write
right,
you have to pee white.
Keep hydrated.
So listen, if all you got out of this training is to drink, look, he's right, by the way. So I will just tell you, so 2 things. First of all, I've gone through Jim's book carving process. Is that what you still call it, right?
Right.
Book carver. And what he said is right. I thought when I sat down with Jim, we were going to jump in and start outlining a book. And we did that eventually. But the first part, I won't talk about proprietary methods. I'll simply tell you the first part is designed to get you into a state where you are deeply connected with your audience, which is the most important thing to do when it comes to actually writing a book. And we'll talk a little bit more about the writing part. I've also got some resources for you. I have an article that I wrote on how to write a book fast, how to write a good book fast. And there are some tools available as well. Some of you in chat have been asking how to contact Jim. I'm going to give you his Facebook page in a moment so that you can contact him directly there if you want to do that. That's what Jim asked to do. All right. So tip number 1 is to get into state. By the way, I want to catch up really quickly on some of the comments. Y'all are amazing. Thank you for just the great comments that you've said. David Zetz, my man, I've been watching your videos, by the way. It cracks me up. You're doing awesome with those. And you're doing a lot of movements that I can't do. So David Stoll, my man. Good morning, Ed. These sessions have indeed been great, haven't they? Great Dan Bozeman. Hello, Charlie, Carla. Good to see you. Hello, Sally. Welcome back. Jim says, or Coach Scott says, Jim was the first one to tell me I could write a bestseller, and he was right. Thank you, Jim. I love it, man. John Butler says, oh, that's a question. We may have time to get to that today, if not on Monday. The book, oh, I love this. This is Kevin, who said the book introduced me to Ed. I had a beautiful opportunity to connect with Kevin and his wife at an event. It was on a break at one of my events, and I just simply asked them, tell me how you came to me. And they said, actually, it was his wife. He said, she said, I bought 5 personal development books. Yours was one of them. I didn't read the other 4. I read yours, and here we are. Okay. So it just goes to show you that you can grow your business, and you can also help a lot of people. Denise, thank you for your awesome comments. I appreciate it. What's up, Oz from Iron Core Way? Hey, Aubrey, welcome back, and welcome. Thank you for coming. So good to see you all, and thank you, Jim. Let's jump into the rest of the content. So as we're going, please put your questions and your comments in chat. Again, we're going to give you some time towards the end of the show to get your questions asked. If you just joined us, this is the top 9 book publishing tips to share your message. I'm here with my book publisher, 21 Day Miracle, Jim House. Jim, take us to tip number 2.
Tip number 2 is to create an invisible, perfect structure. What this means is that you have to decide where you want to take your reader, the journey you want your reader to go on, and the outcomes you want them to walk away after they finish the book. And then essentially you're very elegantly reverse engineering that. And I'm going to tell you it never happens well on accident. Real quick story. Research tells us that if someone closes a book for some reason other than they have to take the meatloaf out of the oven or they have to pick the kids up at soccer practice, if it just closes, it means their brain, their subconscious somehow disconnected with the content, and that book is probably never going to be opened again. So our job at the very least is to make sure we don't give their subconscious any reason to disconnect. And the critical technique for doing that is creating a structure in advance that is a perfect idea flow of your content to take this reader on a journey on this journey. And what's most important about that is it has to be intentional. In fiction, they say, are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you plot the whole book out in advance, or are you a pantser? Do you just kind of start with a character and see where it goes? You can't be a pantser to write good nonfiction. You have to plan the whole thing out in advance. Go ahead.
When we did 21 Day Miracle, and full disclosure, we didn't use Jim's process for this book. We did it in the middle of me writing, which was not ideal. I acknowledged that to him. He turned chicken something into chicken salad or something. Anyway, so but I will tell you, there's a extremely critical part of this book. I'm going to show you how we use Jim's process. There's a part of the book where I talk about a process for coming up with a dream and then executing it. And it begins with stating your intention, and then it goes on to connecting emotion to your intention, and then some activities to take to get towards that action. And Jim came to me on about the fifth day writing the book, and he goes, "Hey, this chapter's not done." And I'm like, "Yeah, the chapter's done. It's like chapter 5." I'm like, "It's done." And he goes, "No, you have to explain the 3 tips. You just put them down, but you didn't explain them." And I said, "Honestly, Jim, I got tired of that chapter and I moved on." So if it wasn't for something like that, it would have left people with an incomplete story. And when you leave people with an incomplete story, they don't tell you, they just don't read it anymore. And you've all done this before. I have too, where you read a book and then you feel like, I feel like I was on the train going this way, and then all of a sudden the train jumped the tracks and went this way. I don't even know where I am. And instead of plotting through it, people just leave. Okay, so if you want a book that people truly consume, you need to do what Jim just said in tip number 2, which is to create I spelled that wrong, didn't I? A prefect structure. Bam. If I only had Jim House's editorial staff when I created these slides this morning. Invisible, perfect structure. I'm going to leave that in the recording, just as bad as it is right there, Jim.
It works.
All right. So that was tip number 2. Tip number 3 coming up. This is the top 9 book publishing tips that share your message. We're hanging out Focus Friday, baby. Jim House and I. Jim, take me to tip number 3.
Tip number 3 is leverage all of your firsts. Your book is littered with all kinds of firsts, and it starts with the very first sentence in your book. It starts with the very first paragraph. It starts with the very first chapter. Let's just focus on that for a second. When you pick up a book in a bookstore, or if you used to pick up a book in a bookstore, you open up it's that first line. You get one, now even just a short amount of time to capture their attention. Everybody's vying for their attention. And so that first, I'm just going to focus on this, and you can repeat it. There's a lot of heavy lifting going on to create a good book throughout, is you need to make sure that first line especially sings. That lead is awesome. And then what I have people do is on the first paragraph, I have them write 10 versions of the first paragraph. And about 7, it gets really hard. But version 8, sometimes a new structure for that paragraph opens, because you want to be, when they open that book, you want to be giving your best so that they know, oh my gosh, I need to keep reading. You only get one chance to make a first impression with a book. So at the every beginning of every chapter, you have a first. Make the first paragraph of every chapter sing. Make the first line of every paragraph when you can sing. You have so many firsts. Don't waste those.
Yeah, so we're going to get into actually writing, the process of writing. But this is really important, what Jim just said. You have, first of all, the beginning of your book's almost always going to be not what you want it to be, because you're going to get into motion as you go. We'll talk a little bit more about that. as we go. But like he said, what happens in the beginning is huge. Your first chapter is more like a sales letter for your book than it is content. And again, we're going to go a little deeper on that, but that's extraordinary. Tip number 3, leverage all of your firsts. If you just joined us, by the way, my name is Ed Rush. I am here with my book publisher, Jim House. We're talking about the top 9 tips to publish your message. We're rocking and rolling. Baby, you ready to go to 4?
Absolutely.
All right. Tip number 4.
Tip number 4 is write a good book that only you can write. So the key here is that you've heard it said that there is no new information on the planet. Everything's been said or been done. So why would they be interested in reading your book, hearing your things when someone else has said similar things in probably 100 different books before you? The key is that you have your own flavor of this. You have your own experience. You have your own insights, your own wisdom, your own soul, your own gifts that create a bias for how you present this. Now, this is probably the most esoteric of all the tips, but it's really important to reflect on yourself and say, okay, if you're writing this book, so if Ed and I wrote the same book, they're going to be very different books. They both will be good books, but they'll be different because they'll come from our knowledge. So what I invite you to do is really think about what's the most important part of you that you want to imbue into your book so that they get a connection with you. And that may not be just telling a bunch of your stories, but when you have this real clear of this is who I want to be, this is my truth that I'm going to share with my readers, it filters and presents all of your content in a way that allows them to connect with you.
Yeah, and interestingly, so I really like this. And this connects with, I think it was on Tuesday during the social media discussion with Marquetta. One of the tips that she had was simply to be you. There's a lot of people who the moment that they start writing a book, essentially turn themselves into their version of Tony Robbins or their version of Les Brown or their version of Brian Tracy. Be you. Tell your stories. Be self-deprecating in your own way. If you're going to tell stories about other people, make them your stories about other people. But really, do your book, because you've got this beautiful story and message inside of you that doesn't need to sound like somebody else. It can sound just like you, right?
Absolutely. It's so important. And this is critical to make it a good book. Without that, it's an average book at best.
Yeah, good. All right, cool. So let's take a moment really quickly. This, by the way, was tip number 4. Write a good book that only you can write. So we're going to catch up real quick on some of the comments in chat. Dr. Tom, how do you get a number I? He means 1. Look, I'm not the only one who misspells. All right, so he says, how do you get a number 1 bestseller on Amazon? We may have time towards the end to go a little bit deeper on this question. It is a little bit more complicated than we probably have time for. So maybe we could do another side training just on that particular topic. But it's not as hard as you think it is. And so, hello, Catherine. Good to see you. Welcome. He said, Coach Scott said, that's why I write short books. Denise says, are we talking all nonfiction? What do you think, Jim? For the most part, we've been leveraging off of a nonfiction book, which is 21 Day Miracle, the book that Jim helped me write. So far, though, I think the strategies that we're teaching will work for you in a fiction book, except for the BU part, and then you just be the best author you can about your character. What do you think, Jim, about that?
Yeah, well, the elements of fiction are the fact that there's no value in a fiction book. So no one's going to turn the page because they want the next great tip. They're going to turn it because they're interested and they want to. And these are techniques that help you build a book where you're keeping people to want to turn the page. So in that way, those are strong, powerful writing tips that you want to try and elegantly put into your nonfiction book. Fiction itself is a bit of a different animal, but we're looking at books that can share their message in a way that they can make a bigger impact into the world.
So I'd say we're mostly talking about nonfiction, but I will say, and just to clarify what Jim just said, when he said fiction books have no value, what he meant was there's no continuing teaching value.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I love fiction.
I mean, we both read fiction, so we think.
I started writing fiction. Yeah, it's part of my. Yeah, it's why I'm. Yeah, I did. Absolutely.
I have a dream one day to write a science fiction space opera. Okay. One of these days, baby. One of these days. All right. So cool. And some really great other questions. Aubrey, I will turn my volume up. Thank you for sharing that as well. All right, Jim, if you have just joined us, I am here with Jim House. We're talking about the top 9 book publishing tips to share your message. We've taught tips 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you're watching this on a recording, go back and watch the full episode. Jim, take us to tip number 5.
Tip number 5 is to create a big idea motif. And the basic principle of this is that comes from Chip and Dan Heath, famous New York bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers, wrote a book called Made to Stick. And they did some studies about what was it that allowed a reader, was it about a book that made a reader more likely to recommend the book that they just read to one of their friends they were talking to. And they found the number one thing is that it was easy for them to tell their friends what the book was about. There was some big idea, some motif that was repeated throughout the book repeatedly, so that you have several in your book. It's real, you can accomplish anything with strategic sprints. That was one of the motifs in your book when you add in your 21-day miracle book. So when you're creating your book, get real clear about what's the biggest idea you want them to walk away with, to be able to tell to other people. So you're going to help them talk about your book, and then put it in your book as many times as you can without, the fine line here is you don't want to beat a dead horse. So you can say it different ways. You can put it in elegantly, mix it in with stories, but it makes it real clear to someone else, hey, this is what this book is about.
So, and the interesting thing about this big idea, and I'm going to kind of nail this home as you're thinking about your topic, because sometimes authors get in this frame where you're like, my idea has to be truly unique. And what I mean by truly unique is it has to come from outer space, and no one should have ever talked about this ever. So I'm going to share my screen quickly, and I want to show you 3 books. And I'm going to show you how each of these 3 authors used this technique that together Jim and I are going to teach. I just have to pull it up. Here we go. Okay, so you should see right now, this is the book. This is my book, 21-Day Miracle. But I'm going to shift over really quickly. This is Darren Hardy's book. Now, Darren Hardy is a friend of mine, and he wrote a book called The Compound Effect, which interestingly it's almost like the photo negative of 21-Day Miracle. It literally is a book about how you stick with things for a really long time. Now, the theme of the book is you do something and then you do it consistently and you stick with it. That theme is not a new theme. People have been talking about that for about 6,000 years, okay? So it's not a new theme, but it's a new frame of an older theme. And the new frame is the compound effect, okay? Here's another book. This was written by a friend of mine named Hal Elrod. Some of you have read this book. It is a very popular book. I don't remember the latest numbers that he shared with me, but it's a lot. It's a lot of books that he's sold, okay? And he continues to sell a lot of books. Just look, for example, he's got 4,682 ratings. That's a lot, okay? And by the way, I'm going to scroll down and make a side point and then get back to the main point. I want you to look for a second. I have not looked at this ahead of time, but look at that. 3% of those were 1-star reviews. Those people are called idiots, okay? So I could say it about his book and not mine. I'm just telling you, even the best books in the world have 1-star reviews because people are idiots, okay? Larry Wingett said, people are idiots, and I can prove it. That was one of his book titles, by the way. Okay, back to the point. Hal Elrod's book, Miracle Morning. The thematic summary of this book is get up early, because when you get up early, you can get more done, okay? Now, get up early, you can get more done is a success principle that's been around for about 6,000 years. Hal Elrod was not the first person to wake up at 4 in the morning and man, I get more done if I wake up early in the morning. But what he did was he took a long-standing success principle and packaged it in a new way. Did you catch me? Okay, so Darren Hardy took a long-standing success principle and packaged it in a new way. Hal Elrod took a long-standing success principle and packaged it in a new way. The 21-Day Miracle is a book about strategic sprints. It's a book about going fast for a short period of time towards your destination. That is a success principle that's about 6,000 years old, okay? It was repackaged in a different way with a different feel or a different motif and sold essentially as a new idea, okay? And in fact, it was because there was no one else teaching the 21-day miracle. So,
right.
One of the tips to writing a great book that captures people's attention is creating a new spin on something that already works. All right, Jim, back to you on that one point. I wanted to really hammer that home.
Yeah, so and it's that has, you have to do it elegantly, because the downside of that, or the easy way to approach it, is I'm just going to put this 3 times in every chapter, and then that law of familiarity kicks in and people no longer pay attention to it.
Yeah, and by the way, another way to go at this is to take a commonly held belief system and teach the opposite. So for example, back to 21-Day Miracle, the first part of this book, the first sentence of this book says, do you want to know the biggest lie in personal growth? The tortoise and the hare. And then the book goes on to show why that's wrong. So again, another option is to take a success principle that people hold on to, debunk it, and teach your own. All right, so that is tip number 5. Big one for you, by the way. Publishing tip number 5, your big idea motif. All right, I'm going to catch up really quickly on chat. John says, the world needs idiots. Otherwise, 5-star review schemes wouldn't work. I love that. Thank you, Coach Scott. Great distinction. Timeless concepts reframed with your unique perspective. Compound effect book and course. Dennis Bauer says, do you have specific techniques for getting more reviews? Let's do that one for sure in the question section at the end, Jim. We will talk a little bit more about the reviews. There's one really simple way to getting more reviews. Intriguing Gurus, if you have time, a couple of quick examples of invisible structure. Okay, so I wrote that one down as well for that. All right, so let's jump back into the content. We should have some time at the end for some questions. We also should have some time for rapid fire Focus Friday stuff. I want to hear what you're going to implement in the next week. All right, so if you just joined us, my name is Ed Rush. I'm here with my book publisher, Jim House. This is the top 9 book publishing tips to share your message. We just did tips 1 through 5. And I'll just tell you that when I bring in experts, I don't bring in this people out there speaking and teaching on this stuff. I bring in the people who are actually doing it. And Jim has been actually doing it for some of the biggest names in the world for quite some time. So Jim, take us to tip number 6.
Tip number 6 is don't let your book get too long. Now, the most frequent question I get when people find out that I'm a high-end book coach is, how long should my book be? I'm sure you've probably heard that as well. And my answer is not what they expect to hear. My answer is always, your book should be not 1 word longer and not 1 word shorter than it needs to perfectly execute your perfect invisible plan for your book. So that's the challenge is, and Ken Blanchard, who's the author of about 9 million New York Times bestsellers, and he creates, most of his are shorter books, by the way. He says that the biggest mistake that most first-time authors, and I would say that almost all authors make, is that they put too much content in their book. And I want to say I sympathize with this. I understand completely how this happens, because you can make a plan. Even when you make an elegant plan, you're writing about a topic that you're very familiar with, one of your areas of expertise. And in your plan, you talked about this point, but then you have all of this wisdom, all these teachings, all these experience, all these stories related to this. And your mind says, hey, the reader would benefit from knowing this as well. And so you start to include information that wasn't part of your plan. I call that content creep. And the scope of the content just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Remember, we need to take the reader on an invisible content journey that's perfect from thought to thought to thought to thought. Because if their subconscious mind disconnects, they close the book forever. So the way I have people do that, one of the ways is we create some guardrails. And for each section and ultimately for each chapter, we create a big idea or a takeaway sentence or a summary sentence, one sentence that says, okay, after they've read this section of my book, this is the one thing if they only get one thing that they're going to walk away with this from the section, it's going to be this. And so all of the writing, all the points have to support the reader walking away with that one idea. And I call that big idea sentences.
That's huge. Okay, this is huge. And I want to just kind of anchor on this for a moment. I brought some show and tell. This is my first book. This is called Fighter Pilot Performance for Business. I'm trying not to get it shiny. That I wrote that in 2008. It was a series of articles that I took off my website and put into a book. It's 78 pages. It was, let me just put it this way. It was a 25-page book that I jammed into 78 pages, okay? I call this my Battlestar Galactica book. This isn't published anymore. I'm just playing around because you can see what I first wrote in 2008. I republished this book. I thought I had it sitting here. I republished this book under a new title called Take the Shot. And if you want it, by the way, edrush.com/free book. You can have it on me. Okay. So that book is there. Now, I think this was my fourth book. It was called Warrior. This is the old cover. I rebranded the cover and I changed the title of this as well. That's actually on my Amazon page. This is 288 pages. This is the longest book that I've ever written. And the book is long because it's everything I wanted to say. Okay. Now, what Jim said about content is important. Because as thought leaders and teachers, sometimes we just feel like if we can just throw up on top of people, they'll be better off, okay? And you have to understand that people actually begin to, and I mean this when I say this, at some point, they begin to almost despise you if you're giving them too much. Because if you give too much initially, eventually you're gonna give everything, okay? But if you give too much initially, you overwhelm someone. When you overwhelm someone, you make them feel inadequate. And when you make someone feel inadequate, they'll blame you, okay? So you have to deliver your content in such a way that people can get a hold of it, take the initial action to get some success with your idea, and then move to the next thing. And that's really, Jim, I think of all the things you did for me, and there are a lot, the thing that you did the most for me was create a book structure that was easy enough for someone to get through and implement, but still rich in content, right?
Amen. And I tell you what, even people I work with after we plan this, the temptation is so strong, even because you want to help people and you think by giving this some additional information, it's going to help them. But if they close the book forever, you can't help them anymore.
Yeah. So if I think about this, I have a 13-year-old son. And if my 13-year-old son came to me and said, Dad, what do I need to be successful? I could go for 3 days on that. Like I could come to my office. I've got slides, I could do 3 days. And by the end of 3 days, he'd be like, I wish I had never, ever asked this question, And so start with make promises and keep them. Like that's a good place to start on the question of how to be successful. Keep your promises. And that might be enough for my 13-year-old for like 4 months, or 4 years, who knows? So my point though is, if you're going to teach someone that way, teach them the way that you would normally do it and give it to them in bite-sized chunks. All right, good stuff, man. I love it. We're getting deep, baby. We're going deep into the content book stuff. So we've got 2 more tips in about 10 minutes to go. We're going to take your questions. All right, and Focus Friday, baby. We're going to dial it in this week. All right, so it's going to be great. I just did like a Philly. I grew up in Philly. I don't normally have this Philly accent come up, but I was like, So I don't know if you caught that. I got it right there. Every once in a while, it just slides out on Fridays. All right, we are in the top 9 book publishing tips to share your message. My name is Ed Rush. I'm here with my book publisher, Jim House. Jim, take us to tip number 8. Wait, hold on a second.
We're on tip number 7.
Sorry, let's do that again. All right, so this is the top 9 book publishing tips to share your message. I'm here with my book publisher, Jim House. Take me to tip number 7.
Tip number 7 is polish your stories. Stories are the gas pedal in your book. That's what keeps people going. We need to keep we don't want to give anybody any reason to disengage. That's why the structure is super important. We need to keep them involved. But to keep them motivated and engaged, it requires really good stories. And most of us have really good stories. The problem that I see in so many books I read, in almost all non-published stories, is it's a very mediocre retelling of what's potentially a really great story. So I want to give you an exercise I use with all my clients real quickly. This will illustrate it perfectly. So imagine your favorite song, a song that you can sing along with, that you love. And every time you hear it, it gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling. It just is, oh, that song comes on the radio and yes, you just immediately feel good. Now imagine you're in a dark karaoke bar and some drunk guy gets up, sings that same song, and just butchers it. And it's horrible. Now, it's the same message. It's the same song. The challenge is it's just not presented in its best way. So when you have these stories, you want to polish them up, edit them, work on them on the side, polish them. You know, you watch the Michael Teague interviews with Ed. He's a genius at helping you create really good stories, and that's a whole nother skill set. But don't waste your stories. I can talk more about that, but I can see you want to jump in, Ed.
No, I was just laughing at the drunk guy. I thought that was pretty good. I was sitting here imagining a drunk person standing up on stage and reading my book out loud. I think.
Can I give you a tip that I think we're the only ones in publishing
go
that use? So a lot of people will put mediocre stories in their book because it's like, okay, I'm talking about this golf swing, and I have a story about a golf swing. It's a boring story, but it's perfectly relevant. It's related to the topic, and so they put that story in. Do not do that, please, please, please. What we do is we work on our stories parallel at separate from the content. And what I have people do is I call it story mining, where they go through and pull out the best stories from their life, the best stories from their clients' lives. And what we're looking for is the best stories, the stories that that people really like to listen to. And then we polish those stories up, and we find a way where where that related mediocre story might be tempted to slide in. We take a really good story and we find a way to really elegantly connect that. So we lead into the same content, but we start with a better story, and that just will elevate the reader experience of the book greatly.
So Jim, Denise Wozniak, while you were talking about the drunk person singing, said, "Jim House knows my husband," and then she said, "No, sorry, my ex-husband. My husband is right next to me, and he's a good singer." So I thought that was a great,
That's awesome.
That was a great comment. Your stories are there to support your points. And if they don't, then don't use them. And I will tell you, one of the best and most important processes of your book is the part you're going to hate the most. And that is the part where you delete things. 20%, conservatively 20% of 21 Day Miracle never made its way into the book. I will tell you in the Q&A segment a good way to make yourself feel good about that, because deleting content is really hard. But if it's not there, and I mean this down to the word, if the word does not support what your objective is, it's gone. Your goal is not to write a 60,000 word book. Your goal is to write a great book. Okay. And that could be 20,000 words if it's take the shot, or it could be 150,000 words if you're, writing Les Miserables or something. Good.
I think it's worth saying that just like any endeavor that you care deeply about, that you really want to have an impact with, there are no shortcuts to creating a really good book. It requires heavy lifting. All of these things, you can do it, but just know that just like everything worthwhile in your life that you want to make an impact with, that doesn't happen accidentally. It doesn't happen haphazardly. It happens intentionally, and it requires an investment of your time to do that.
Yeah. All right, cool. So we are in the top 9. If you just joined us, by the way, my name is Ed Rush. I'm here with my guest and my book publisher, Jim House. We're talking about the top 9 book publishing tips to share your message. We've got 2 tips left. Jim, take us to tip 8.
Tip number 8 is write chapter 1 last. So the reason for this is we want the chapter 1 really is essentially, and Ed, you alluded to this earlier, chapter 1 is really a type of sales letter, the only purpose of which is to enroll readers into finishing the book. You really want them, there's several outcomes that this chapter 1 or opening, however you want to name it, but the very first touch when they read the book, they have to get to know you a little bit. They have to fall in love with you a little bit to know. We talked about, okay, how is this book going to be different? Oh, this is someone whom I want to listen to. This, you have to give them a sense. And that's where it's better to be a little bit generous in your vulnerability. Don't bleed all of the story and tell them the stories that are unresolved. that need to be resolved through therapy, but very purposely be vulnerable about so they can connect with you on a human level. But then you want them to know that, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about and he can help me. Oh yeah, or woman, excuse me. And if you don't finish this book, I'm going to miss, my life is going to be hell. So
yeah, I mean, your book. So let's take this and expand it. The first thing you say on a video or a YouTube live session should be the thing to get people to come in and be excited about being there. The first thing you say at an event. So for example, many of you are coming to the upcoming Ultimate Speaker event. I always tell speakers the first thing you do when you walk on stage essentially turns into the sales letter for your entire talk. Most people who do events start events by saying, you know, the bathrooms are down the hall and we're going to take lunch break today and we're playing golf tomorrow here. No, start with some way to bring people in. Again, I'm going to share my screen and I want to show you, this is 21 Day Miracle. I opened up the actual first chapter and I'm not going to read the entire first chapter, but I want to read the first beginning. I did this, I showed you, read this part. Do you want to know the biggest lie? Hang on a second. Let me make this just a little bit bigger. Do you want to know the biggest lie in personal growth, the tortoise and the hare? You've been told that slow and steady wins the race, and you've been told that persistence and consistency create champions. They don't. That's because in real life, the rabbit always wins. That's the first few sentences that, it's 6 sentences, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6 sentences that automatically grabs someone and brings them in. Now, the first chapter is only about 1.5 pages long, but I want you to look at the last part of the first chapter. What if you could invest just 3 short weeks to become the person you want to be? What if you could quickly accomplish your goals and simultaneously increase your income and impact? What if you had a secret formula for accomplishing any goal, no matter how hard? You'd win every time. This book is about winning every time, okay? And what I'm trying to do in the book, and again, I did this with Jim's help, I'm trying to get someone that by the time they're done with the end of the first chapter, they're like, this book's going to be awesome. Yep. Okay. That's your job of the first chapter. And that's why I wrote this first chapter first, but it was a little bit of inspiration, frankly. That's why Jim says to write it afterwards, because when you're done writing, you now know what's in the book. And so now you can make promises in that first chapter that you can fulfill throughout the rest of the book. Okay. Absolutely. So huge tip. Any last thoughts on that, Jim, before we go to the last tip?
Well, that was one of the things we needed to do, because that was such a strong premise. I mean, as I recall, when you were away on your personal retreat, and that was kind of the idea for the book, it was clear we needed to lead with that, but then we needed to make sure that they got to know you as soon in the book as we could.
Yeah, exactly. And again, think of your first chapter. It doesn't have to be all like it's content, right? It doesn't have to be all benefits, although what you just read are a bunch of benefits, but it does need to bring people in and show them why this book is going to be so great. And the truth is, you don't have to say it that way. You don't have to say, here's why this book's going to be so great, because you're not talking about your book fundamentally. You're talking about your reader, okay? Mm-hmm. All right, so let's hit the last tip. If you just joined us, my name's Ed Rush. I'm here with my book publisher, Jim House. We're talking about behind the scenes tips on how to publish your message and grow your brand. We've been through 8 of the first tips. I'll summarize them quickly. First one was get into state. The second one was invisible, perfect structure. The third one, leverage all of your first. Fourth, write a good book only you can write. Fifth, big idea motif. 6, don't let your book get too long. 7, polish your stories. Number 8, we just did. Write chapter 1 last. This is the top 9 book publishing tips to share your message. Jim, take me to tip number 9.
Tip number 9 is write a book worth reading. So the great thing about the advent of print on demand and Amazon is that anybody can write a book now and publish it. And the great tragedy of print on demand is that everybody can write a book now and publish it. And so you've seen it. We've all seen it. There are so many books up there that don't belong. When I started in the publishing industry, back really at the very early advent of print on demand, they only had, if you wanted a book, self-published, you had to buy 5,000 copies to fill your garage with it. So you were trying to get your book sold in the traditional publishing world, and value was the great gatekeeper. Quality was the great gatekeeper. The only way your book would see the light of day and get published between 2 covers and sit on a bookshelf in Barnes & Noble was if first of all, the agent felt like there's enough value in there that they could sell it to an editor. And then the editor had to say, oh, there's enough value in it that I can convince the accounting team that we can make money on this. And then it has to be sold by the design team. So the only way a book saw light of day in the former model was it had value, and not only value, but value that other people were willing to pay for, not just by me, the author, selling it, but other people could sell it because there was so much value. And so it's really easy to do a book now just to put a book out. And I would suggest, my premise is, we talk about don't let the great book in your head become a disappointing book in your hands, is everybody can do that. But you need to follow these steps. And a couple of the elements that are really important it has to be generous. It has to come from within, and it has to be a valuable contribution to the world it's not just noise adding to the noise and clutter.
Yeah, and the thing about it, as you're watching us, is you have that. You have it. I mean, the number of people out there, the number of self-proclaimed gurus out there who have written trash that people love is high. And the reason why they read that person's book is because yours isn't out there. Okay. Right. So you've got the message, you've got the heart, you've got the desire, go get your book published. And I'll just tell you, I mean, I went through a few of my books. I'll admit this publicly. I don't normally say this. I get emails from people who read 21 Day Miracle because I've had so many people write it. And the emails I get from people that tell me they like it, and they say really nice things. And then in their email, they say, and I'm going to go get all of your other books and read them too.
Oops.
and honestly, I feel like, I don't know how to say it to them, but I'm like, my other books aren't as good. They're just not, because I grew as an author. So by the time I got to 21 Day Miracle, I was primed and ready to go and to write a really, really great book. And I almost feel like telling people, don't go buy those other books. Like, just trust me. Like, they're good, but they're not like what you're expecting, because they read 21 Day Miracle, which is a lot better, frankly, than all the other ones. And so my point in saying that is it took me getting through some of those books before I got the one that really hit. Okay. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to you, but I am saying that one of your books will change the world. Mm-hmm. It might be the next one you write. It might be the third from now one you write. But to get to the third from now one you write, you have to write this one now. Okay. Right. So either way, to get to the objective, you need to do it now. You need to write your message and get it out there. And the great thing about, I already told you, I changed the cover and I changed the title. And the subtitle on that book, I changed the insides of the book. Jim and I are working on a revision right now of 21 Day Miracle. Okay. So you can change stuff fairly quickly. So it's not like if you put something out there and it has a spelling error, you can change it like that. And then the new one's out there. So that's good stuff. All right. So that was tip number 9. I love it, dude. Write a book worth reading. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We got a little bit of extra time. So we're going to go into some rapid fire Q&A. What this means is you can ask your question. I've already got a few questions for Jim, and we're going to do quick, boom, boom, boom answers. And in about 5 minutes, I'm going to take your Focus Friday things, the things you're going to focus on to change the world. Before I do that, really cool comment here from Paul Bigham, who says, Jim, you have a peaceful and easy way. It sounds like a Eagles song. Peaceful and easy way to work through building out one's books. And a delightful person with whom to spend time, especially with a side of Pappy Van Winkle 23. Wait a second. Hold on a second. Did you guys like drank bourbon together?
We did.
No, but
he earned it.
And what about your Meshuggah over here, baby? Come on, that's good bourbon. That's like good.
Really good. We've had some good wine to celebrate your book, Ed.
I know. I'm playing around. I took Jim. We went to Morton's and I brought a bottle of. I think I brought Duckhorn, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So we did. I'm sorry. So I'll say that now. All right. So a couple good, really some great comments. Thank you for that. Quick question from Dennis Bauer. Do you have a specific technique for getting more reviews? Jim, you go, and then I'll go right after you.
Well, and Ed, you're better. I'm just going to let you go because you're better at this than me.
Okay. That's fine. I'll just do it really quickly. So Dennis, first one is ask. And so I always ask. Remember I said people send me emails about my book, or they hit me up on Facebook and say they read the book, or they see me at an event and they say they read the book. And so I'm going to share my screen for a second, and I'm going to show you somebody who right in the beginning, when I first published the book, immediately bought it, downloaded it, and read it, and emailed me. And I think you're still watching. It was Jim Butts. Okay, so if you look here on this screen, I'll make it a little bit bigger so that you can see it. Jim wrote a review for 21 Day Miracle. And I want you to take a look at this review. I'm not going to read it, but this is a 5-star review from Jim. It was one of the very first reviews that came in. Check this out. 81 people found that review helpful. It's still the #1 review on the top of my reviews. Andy Lockwood, who was a client at the time, wrote a 5-star review about how he can't stand self-help books, but he really liked this book and how it was entertaining. 66 people found that review helpful. And then this numbnuts rocks wrote this one, and I don't even know why. I wish I could get it off, but I can't. Just to show you, even the great books still have 3-star reviews from people who thought it was. I had one person literally read a review, and their entire review was MEH, meh. I'm like, dude, I spent like 3 weeks writing this book, and all you can write is 3 letters. All right. So anyway, so back to getting reviews before I go on my rant. Is this. So when people email me, Dennis, I usually just say, thank you for the compliment. And then I respond to them and talk a little bit to them. And then I say, by the way, when you get a chance, please jump back on Amazon and write a review of the book. I know it's really important because there's other people who wrote not so great reviews. It's important for me to have some 4- and 5-star reviews. And if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be a big favor to me. And I put the link back to the book, and I tell you, everybody that emails me or Facebook or whatever, if I ask that, they do it. Okay, so when someone responds, I usually ask. I'll often ask my email list if they would go and do reviews. And I ask them to write a 4 or a 5-star review, because if you go to a book and they've got 50 reviews and they're all 5-star reviews, you're like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Nobody gets all 5-star reviews. So I ask people to do 4 and 5. And in one case, when this book came out, the first 27 reviews were a 5-star. I actually emailed a friend of mine who read it. I said, look, I need you to write a 4-star review. So because you want to, you can't just all be 5. And trust me, the numbnuts will get in there and start writing their 1- and 2-star reviews. The people that didn't even read the book, okay, or don't like you because you were in the military or something. Goodness. All right. So again, I'm not going to go there because I will start to go. But there's first question. All right. So let me see if I got a couple other questions in here, but I want to make sure that Jim, anything to add while I'm looking for the other questions? Here you go. Another question. This one's for you. Russ Gordon, my man from Colorado Springs. Do you think the best books reflect personal experience in your story? What do you think?
I absolutely like to learn about the author in a story in some way, and it might be just I think one thing worth about stories is that there's a lot of talk about the hero's journey, and not every story is a hero's journey. And sometimes a piece of your story can be 3 pages long, or it can be 2 sentences. It doesn't have to be long, but I think it allows me to connect with you and why you feel certain ways about the content. You have to be just like your content, though. You have to be just as judicious and prudent and purposeful about what you put in and sharing about you. But absolutely, yes.
All right, cool. Thank you, Robert, who said, I will get an autographed audiobook of your 21 Day Miracle, and I want it autographed. So very, very good. All right, so I'm going to give you 2 quick, I'm going to give you 2 bonus unannounced publishing tips, just because you are amazing for being here on Friday. Okay, so grab a pen and write these down. And then as I'm giving these last 2 tips, I want you to do 2 things. Number 1, I would love for you to tell me in chat, either on Facebook or on YouTube, what your big implementation item is for the next 7 days. Today's Focus Friday. So I want to hear what you're going to be implementing over the next 7 days, and you're going to tell the rest of the community. The second thing, as soon as you're done with that, if you haven't already done that, click the thumbs up button below. That's the like button. That tells everybody else that they need to go look at this content. Okay, so do those 2 things while I'm teaching these last 2 little bonus tips. This second tip, by the way, I've not seen anyone teach this, and this is gold. And I'm going to show you in a second how you can get Amazon to send traffic to your website for free. Okay, So the first one, I'm going to share my screen one more time. The first tip that I'll give you is this. The most important part of your book is one that you're looking at right now. See this cover, title, subtitle, okay? Cover, title, subtitle. Jim does this, so do I, whenever we're working with authors. The first thing we typically work with is the title, the subtitle, and the cover, okay? The reason why is, you ever heard people say you can't judge a book by its cover? The reason they say that is because everyone judges a book by its cover, okay? One of the reasons why 21 Day Miracle was so successful is because the promise of the book is on the cover. If you say to somebody, I've got this new book, it's called The 21 Day Miracle, How to Change Anything in 3 Short Weeks, no one ever looks at you and says, oh, really? What's that about? If you hand someone the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, no one ever looks at you and goes, oh, what's that about? You hand somebody the book, What Color is Your Parachute? People go, what's that book about? Okay, it's actually a book about recruiting, and it's a good book. It's a good book, and it's actually a well-known book, but the promise of the book isn't on the cover. And that book became successful despite the title, okay? So title, subtitle. If you're gonna use a catchy title, the subtitle needs to define the book. So for example, my book, Warrior, the title is Warrior. It doesn't tell you everything you need to know, but the subtitle says, Understanding the Furious Love of the God Who Fights for You. Now people know what the book's about, okay? So my first bonus tip is to have a great title, subtitle, and cover. Spend your time and attention there. All right. Second bonus tip. This is a big one. This is a big one. I'm telling you. This is big one right here. Okay. And you can do this, and I don't see barely anyone do this. All right. I'm going to go back to my book. See this look inside thing right here. I want you to take a look at this. The first page of my book. See this? Where it says free bonus. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Hang on. I guess I can't. See this thing that says free bonus? This is the first page of my book. See that right there? That's a link. When people click on that link, check this out. Boom. Right to my website, right to an opt-in page. So you can create inside of your Kindle book, you can create links. When you create those links, they show up on the look inside piece that you're sharing with people. Put that first. Literally make that the first thing people can do, because when they do, they go to your website and then they can opt in. I'm going to throw a website underneath. If you haven't gone here, go do this. It's edrushbook.com. It's this website. I'm going to pull it up real quick and just show you. And the reason I'm showing you this is the website that I use when I do media interviews. And it looks similar to the one that I just showed you. This is it right here. Check it out. Get the book. This is click it over to Amazon. The second one is to that page that I just showed you, which is the opt-in page. I've had over 7,000, listen, 7,000 people fill that form in. That's a nice lead generator from a book, and it started with that link right in the front page, okay? It started with, in the paperback, right there, boom, first page, right? There's the link right there. All right, so there's 2 bonus tips. Jim, what do you got? Anything?
Yeah, one big thing that would just serve you throughout. I mean, you can be clever in your cover title, but when you get to your subtitle, you need to be clear. And so throughout the whole book, especially when you're writing it, I would say that clarity over clever every time. Just let that be a lens through which you create everything. At the very end, if you want to make your titles and subtitles more sexy, you can do that. But during the writing, make it easy for your reader and keep it clear.
Yep, you got that right. All right, so put your action items in. I'm going to talk about these in just a second. Clarity over clever. Write that down. Write that down. That's not just for books. That's for everything. Clarity over clever. Okay, I had a woman come to me. She went to my church, and she said, I heard you wrote a book. I'm interested in writing a book as well. I said to her, what's your book title? She said, The Elephant is Yellow. And I said, what is that? I don't know. Was that like a kid's book or something? She goes, no, my son, true story. Her son had autism, and through a special training system that she developed by the 4th and 5th year, her son had almost no demonstrated symptoms of autism. This kid went on to learn like 8 languages. He's a missionary in China right now, which is crazy. So but the book was about her process, and the process she taught her son started with the phrase, "The elephant is yellow." Okay. So I said, look, that's a great story. Put it in the first chapter. But the title of the book should say something like, "How I Taught My 4-year-old to Overcome Autism and How You Can Too," or something like that. It should give the benefit. All right. So I'm going to bounce through a couple of nice comments. By the way, thank you, Denise Wozniak. Yes. Thank you, Aubrey, for saying that. Thanks for putting all the tips in chat. My man, Jim, who wrote that great review. I love it. Sandeep, thank you for your really great comment. Denise, you're the best. I appreciate that. Mike Toy said, action item, add more personal stories to my upcoming book. I love it. Charlie says, I want to help people so much, and I'm like a Labrador who comes in and licks your face. How to tone it down and create content. I love it. Yeah, just give small actionable tips that people can take. I love it. Aubrey, thank you for this. Excellent show, she said. Great, John. Action item, make my high ticket offer. So, John, this show on Monday is going to be for you. I'm going to talk about pricing, okay? How to stop trading dollars for hours and start getting paid what you're worth. So that's the show for you. Let me get back to the comments real quick. Diana worked on LinkedIn profile and added more personal stories. I love it. Awesome. Thanks, John, for the great comments that you made. Gissy says, you're both awesome. Where is Scott Mueller? Scott Mueller, where is your great comment? Did I miss your great comment? So if you want me to see your great comment, you might have to put it back in again. Scott Mueller is my mortician. Hold on, I just missed. He really is. He really is. He sent me an email the other day, and he said, "I'm looking forward to seeing you, but not that soon. Best, your mortician." I don't see your comment, but I know it was amazing. All right, Barry says, "Thanks for the refresher course." Barry's been to our book training. I love it. Fantastic Friday, Braby. Denise says, "Making sure my branding is consistent through all of her social media." Dennis Bauer says, "Yes." He says, I'm great. He is truly a great mortician. All right, Jim House, last comments. Take us home on Friday, baby.
Yeah, I love that you so often say you were meant for more, and that I believe, even though it requires some work, everybody does have a really good book in them. And as you start writing, set the intention that this is going to be even better than I envisioned, and tap into anything that you can. I do it with God, but get some outside help in making the book, just especially with even your intention that you want this book to be as good as you possibly can. Your story is worth telling, and yes, you can make this a really good book.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to wrap up. Jim, do me a favor, write in chat. Please put how do people can find you on Facebook? Either the link to your Facebook page, I think I just pulled up actually. Here, hang on. I'm going to drop this in chat while I'm talking. And if you're interested in contacting Jim, he's at facebook.com/thebookcarver. We'll also put this link below in the description for this show, right after the show. And so, Jim, thank you for your time, man. I appreciate you. Really, thank you for coming. Would love to have you back as usual. And yeah, man, we'll do it again. Thank you, by the way, for what you did for my book, dude. I appreciate it as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been a blast, Ed. Anytime.
Cool. This is the Bunker Bash, by the way, Monday through Friday, 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern. It's the most positive place on the planet for insanely implementable ideas. Do yourself a favor as you go into the weekend. Right now, we're in the middle of coronavirus central in America. And do yourself a favor and give yourself a CV-free day. My family and I, every Sunday, have a day where we don't look at the news, don't listen to the news, and don't talk about what's happening in the world, because you know what? Sometimes you just need some peace. I will see you on Monday when we're going to talk about how to stop trading dollars for hours and get paid what you're worth. This is the Bunker Bash. We'll talk to you soon.